In making human resources successful, the word again is people. Satisfied, loyal employees make up the base for attracting and serving satisfied and loyal customers or clients. Firms with consistent staffing and familiar faces provide that link to the trust a customer wants. On the other hand, there are those times when it's necessary to take action when employees fail to meet performance standards. At the extreme, it can be both necessary and fair to the organization, its customers, and remaining staff that terminating an underperforming staffer is necessary. In this unit, we take up separating and retaining employees. We'll look at the effects of voluntary and involuntary turnover, fair treatment, legal requirements for disciplining employees, fair discipline, how job dissatisfaction affects employee behavior, and how the organization contributes to job satisfaction and retention. Now, there are two types of turnover, involuntary and voluntary. Involuntary turnover is where the organization initiates the split. Now, this can come through terminations or layoffs. There might also be an argument that some sort of strongly encouraged early retirement may fit into this category. Now, that's where a company may need to cut staff and look to employees who are eligible to retire, but to do so on their own, who don't actually want to quit working. Well, then it may turn into a case of retire or be fired. Voluntary turnover, on the other hand, is when the employee makes the decision to leave. Maybe that person has a better job offer. Maybe the employee wants to retire, or maybe there are other reasons why it just doesn't work out for the employee to continue in a particular job. Both voluntary and involuntary turnover are costly. The organization needs to recruit and hire new workers and train them. And when not done right or legally, involuntary turnover can lead to lawsuits that will wind the organization up in court or even lead to violence. We now get into the area of employees' fair treatment. There are the day-to-day actions of the firm to keep well-performing employees satisfied and enthusiastic. But in reality here, we're really dealing with the other end of the spectrum and the scale of spelling out expected performance and behavior and the consequences of failing to meet standards. These are the decisions, procedures, and treatment issues that affect the employee. Now, there are various forms of workplace justice that we'll consider here. There's outcome fairness, where consequences are consistent, expected, and proportionate to the level of a problem and what's needed to fix the situation. Then there's procedural justice. Now, this is a longer list of actions to ensure that fair methods are employed, that they are consistent, unbiased, based on accurate information, correctable, take all viewpoints into account, and are consistent with ethical standards. A third form is interactional justice. Now, this is a procedure where the organization takes the employee's feelings into account when carrying out actions. Provisions are in place to listen to the employee's side of the situation and treat the employee with dignity. Organizations have to be aware of legal requirements involved in employee discipline. It's important to avoid a wrongful discharge that stems from a contract violation or a violation of public policy. Discipline must be administered even-handedly. Human resources and managers must be careful that any discipline is done without discrimination and that it respects employee privacy. A controversial and potentially dangerous aspect of employee discipline can involve searches and surveillance on the job. Now, when these actions are taken, they have to be for legitimate business purposes. Furthermore, the employee needs to know about them. Companies often make it a part of operational policy to let employees know that customer contact calls may be monitored for quality control, that company-owned computers will be monitored for inappropriate use, and that employee work habits may be under scrutiny. Not only should employees know about such company policies, but that provisions need to be in place to allow the employee to consent. When disciplinary matters arise, they need to be shared only with those with a need to know. And when a termination is part of a workplace closure, legally required notice has to be given. There are a number of forms of fair discipline. There's the hot stove rule. Now, here a warning is given that some infraction needs to be stopped and corrected. The hot stove rule is consistent, objective, and lists immediate consequences. There is progressive discipline. Rules are established and communicated between the firm and its employees. Violations carry increasingly severe consequences. It starts with a spoken warning and then moves to a written warning. A next step might be suspension to make the point that something involving the employee is unacceptable, and if that fails to correct the problem, the offending individual's employment may have to be terminated. In this procedure, the steps are all documented in writing. Another disciplinary measure is the alternative dispute resolution. Now, this is the form most often seen in corporate and labor negotiations or disciplinary actions that would involve union members. This involves a management or human resources open door policy. There's peer review in the process. The dispute resolution process then moves to mediation, where both sides will work with a mediator to guide the participants in reaching their own agreed-to solutions. If this fails, then there's the final step of arbitration. Arbitration is where an individual, called an arbiter, will consider the facts of the matter and then decide and present a solution. In some cases, we can have what is called binding arbitration, where both sides must agree in advance that they'll abide by the arbiter's decision. To carry the fair discipline process a step further when dealing with substance abuse or mental illness, you have issues that could be referred to assistance programs. The effects of termination may also be eased in many cases when the organization makes outplacement assistance available. Now, this is where, often in the case of a layoff, the firm will allow an employee leaving the firm the right to use company facilities, equipment, or services and help find a new job that way. Human Resources also deals with minimizing job dissatisfaction. A disgruntled worker not only suffers in his or her own performance, but often poisons the attitudes of other employees. The usual causes of worker dissatisfaction stem from the nature of the job, where a worker may feel he or she has outgrown the job or just gets bored with it. Now, there are cases where a worker will have a poor or even adversarial relationship with a supervisor, which can then affect job performance, if not even spill over into how well the employee's work unit functions. Sometimes pay is an issue if a worker feels he or she is worth more. Then again, some employees just have poor attitudes. Dissatisfaction can lead to a worker's job withdrawal. There may be a change in behavior. The employee may leave the job or request a transfer, or may just start doing less work. This can be viewed as going through the motions, or what we sometimes call mailing it in. We might see a physical job withdrawal that could involve in behaviors such as tardiness or absenteeism. Sometimes there is psychological withdrawal where an employee remains on the job, but that person's mind is elsewhere with a very low level of job involvement. There's also a loss of organizational involvement where an employee is less willing to identify with the organization or put out the effort on the organization's behalf. Now, that person may be the first to leave for another job at the first opportunity. Human Resources can take some steps to increase job satisfaction and retention. May actually start at the front end by hiring employees with good attitudes, the right attitude. Later on the job, if satisfaction does become an issue, it'll be necessary to look at employees who could get their right attitudes back through help. Jobs can be made more meaningful or complex, and we call this job enrichment. Sometimes a change of scenery helps when job rotation might work. A closer study of the situation can help. Sometimes a role analysis can lead to making an employee's role clear and appropriate. Encouraging social support among workers can be valuable, especially where employees look to help each other. Satisfactory pay levels are also important in job satisfaction. Make sure employees understand the company's pay structure and what it takes for receiving pay raises. It also falls on Human Resources to monitor job satisfaction to make sure things continue to go well, if that's the case, or to head off future workplace problems. We'll next take up compensating human resources, pay structures, using pay to recognize employee contributions, and providing employee benefits.